1 year ago, more than 100,000 Armenians were ethnically cleansed from the Nagorno Karabakh Republic, also known as Artsakh. But what is Nagorno Karabakh? Let's break down the history of this complex place. Artsakh, a historical province of Armenian kingdoms, is a mountainous region in the South Caucasus. For centuries, it has been home to a predominantly Armenian population. After the loss of Armenian dynastic rule in the Middle Ages, the broader region was a battleground for empires. By the early 20th century, the Caucasus were part of the Russian Empire. When the empire collapsed after the 1917 Russian Revolution, the newly independent republics of Armenia and Azerbaijan vied for control over Artsakh. The territorial dispute was frozen when the Soviet Union took control of the Caucasus in the 1920s. Despite the region's Armenian majority, in 1923, the Soviet government created Nagorno Karabakh as an autonomous administrative unit within the Azerbaijani Soviet Socialist Republic. This autonomous region was created only on part of Artsakh, artificially reducing the size and cutting off the common border with Armenia. This move sowed the seeds of conflict for years to come. Throughout more than half a century under Azerbaijani jurisdiction, the Armenians of Nagorno Karabakh appealed to Moscow for protection of their cultural, economic, and social rights. These requests were ignored until the final years of the Soviet Union. In the meantime, Azerbaijani leadership pursued strategic resettlement policies to dilute the Armenian majority in Nagorno Karabakh. Against the backdrop of Gorbachev-era promises of openness and restructuring, the Armenians of Nagorno Karabakh sought self-determination. The Karabakh movement began in 1988 with a series of peaceful protests in Stepanakert and Yerevan. In a referendum, the Armenians of Nagorno Karabakh voted to join with Armenia. Azerbaijan responded with violence, including pogroms targeting Armenian populations in Baku and Sumgait. When the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, Nagorno Karabakh declared independence. In response, Azerbaijan launched a brutal war against Armenians in Nagorno Karabakh from 1991 to 1994. Tens of thousands were killed, and hundreds of thousands displaced. In 1994, Russia brokered a ceasefire between the newly independent republics of Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Nagorno Karabakh. The Nagorno Karabakh Armenian forces took control of Nagorno Karabakh and surrounding regions. For nearly 3 decades, Nagorno Karabakh functioned as a de facto independent state, although it was internationally recognized as part of Azerbaijan. During 3 decades of international mediation efforts, peace remained elusive. Without a viable resolution, the threat of violence defined life in Nagorno Karabakh. In 2016, a 4-day war foreshadowed a much larger armed conflict on the horizon. In September 2020, against the backdrop of the COVID-19 pandemic, Azerbaijan launched an unprecedented full-scale war in Nagorno Karabakh. Over the course of 44 days, Azerbaijan, with support from Turkey, captured significant portions of the territory, including the key city of Shushi. A ceasefire brokered by Russia in November 2020 ended the fighting, but left Azerbaijan in control of much of the region. In 2022, Azerbaijani forces attacked Armenia proper, threatening the security of Armenians beyond the borders of Nagorno Karabakh. In December 2022, under the guise of environmental protests, the Azerbaijani government blockaded the only road connecting Nagorno Karabakh to Armenia. For 9 months, the population of Nagorno Karabakh was deprived of food, medicine, and other essentials, leading to a humanitarian crisis. Despite 2 rulings by the International Court of Justice demanding that the blockade be lifted, Azerbaijan exacerbated the suffering of the Nagorno Karabakh people. In September 2023, Azerbaijan launched a lightning offensive on the besieged republic, forcing the dissolution of the state. Fearing for their lives, the entire population fled to neighboring Armenia in a matter of days. Continuously inhabited by Armenians for millennia, for the first time Artsakh fell silent, emptied of its people.